Now, MG Rover. Well, as we say, we are expecting a statement shortly from the Trade and Industry Secretary, Patricia Hewitt. Government under some pressure on this, of course, today with the... Well, let's speak now to motoring expert Robert Bond, joins us in the studio. Is it, do you believe, first of all, as stark as the company is suggesting?
MG Rover have got a really tough pitch on their hands. 60 years ago they survived the Blitz. 30 years ago they survived crazy management, crazy unions and appalling build quality. But this is the tough one. I'm not sure if they can make it. I hope they do.
Without the Chinese deal, is that £100 million from the government absolutely essential?
The reality is, if the government put in £100 million and the Chinese deal does not happen and no other deal happens and there's no other deals on the table as far as we know, then sadly that just won't help. It won't prop the company up for very many minutes.
Old-fashioned image though, isn't it? I mean, you know.
It is, and you know, the essence of the problem is ageing product range. The cost of developing a new car is absolutely phenomenal. The actual cost of screwing that metal together on the line is relatively small. In fact, if people knew how much it actually costs to fold metal and put engines and seats in cars, they'd be quite shocked. It's the development cost, and it's that huge tranche of money that MG Rover now need.
But unfortunately, we've run out of time, run out of money and run out of choices now.
Tony Woodley, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
In a moment we'll speak to our business editor Jeff Randall, but first our motoring expert who's been in the studio right from the moment the announcement was made, Robert Bond. What do you make of everything you've heard in the last 20 minutes?
This deal is not 5 minutes late, and I really do believe, the little that we all know about it at this stage, that everybody's done their best. No, it's 5 years late. I really do think it will be rubbing salt in the wound of all those workers if we try now to start apportioning blame about what should or shouldn't have happened. The deal has failed, the Chinese money is not coming in, and for those reasons there was nothing really anybody else could do, and that's the order of events here.
To our guest in Southampton, first of all, though, of course, we've been to the breach many times with this story. Is this absolutely the end for MG Rover?
I really do think it is, unfortunately. Nobody wants to rub salt in the wound of the people that are hanging out for their jobs there. But I believe the government have been very good over all this. This is a private company that's in terrible difficulties. They've helped it out to see if just another week will resolve it. But really, I think it is all over.
Robert Bond, does this just not tell us about the state of the British car industry generally, and perhaps the European car industry? The bottom line is not enough people wanted to buy Rovers. It doesn't just apply to MG Rover, of course. There's lots of other car companies that have seen massive sales drops as well.
Car production in the UK is doing very well, in fact. Look at the Nissan plant in Sunderland. Record exports, fantastic labour relations. Same at Toyota at Derby. They're making the Avensis there. That's the only place in the world where that car is made, and they're exporting it back to Japan. Same with Honda in Swindon. Look at BMW, what they've done with the Mini in Oxford. BMW have said we'll only make it in Oxford. They sold 7,000 of those cars in March. It's high fashion, highly desirable, low residual values. No, the British car industry, if it's got out in every way right, is doing very well, in fact.
Doing well now, but is it going to last, do you think?
I really do think it is. There is massive investment. When I went to the Toyota factory at Derby, 400-acre site, purpose-built, a roll of steel goes in one end and a car comes out the other. These are not assembly plants where they're screwing things together. They're making cars, and they're making them to a world-class standard.
Now, the Chinese company which has bought MG Rover has been giving details of its plans for the future production of the cars. Nanjing Automobile has announced that some sports cars and high-performance saloons will be made at the Longbridge plant in Birmingham. Robert, thank you very much for joining us. What do you make of this deal?
Well, I think the flags will be out in Longbridge, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of happy families, but it's time to hold our horses a little bit. The Chinese have wanted this company for a long time, and they've finally finished up with it for reputedly around about £55 million, which is just a drop in the ocean up against what the creditors are owed by the former MG Rover company.
What could they possibly build at Longbridge that would be saleable?
Well, if you remember, when we go back to Phoenix, when they started out to build cars, they wanted to be a volume producer, and it was doomed to fail before they set out. Not that anyone wanted it to, it was just the way it was always going to be. And there was another rival group saying they could build the MG-TF, that's still the best-selling roadster, or it was, the two-seater sports car. They were going to build that in Longbridge. I suspect the Chinese will want to do that again in Longbridge. But what they're really after probably is the powertrain, the engine plant, and the rights to build those engines in China, where there is a burgeoning market. There's a huge market in China.
So Longbridge would become just a screwdriver plant?
I suspect so. What Longbridge desperately needs is investments, research and development, and new models, new product. That's what they need. And the MG-TF needs looking at now. It was still selling well, but it needs updating. I think the real story here is what the Chinese wanted to do with ownership of the engine and rights to build the cars in China. Remember that many of those rights have already been sold to the previous interested party, SIAC. They've got the rights to build the cars, but they haven't got the rights to the engines. Maybe those two Chinese companies are going to have a deal on the side. That would make what they've just paid for MG Rover in this country look very cheap.
Chinese production workers are said to be paid something like $30 a month. I should imagine some people at Longbridge would be paid jolly nearly that an hour. Well, but, you know, how can that make sense, building the cars at Longbridge rather than in China?
It doesn't, and that's the trouble. And I think actually that $30 is for a skilled engineer. The people who are actually screwing it together on the line are probably earning half that. What's really happening is in China, there are 2 cars per 1,000 households. That is all set to change. When China has the same number of cars in use per household as we enjoy in the West, there'll be more cars in China than are the rest of the world put together. Therefore, they want to draw in. They're already drawing in steel and oil and driving the prices of those 2 up. They also want to draw in the technology. And without wishing to be too harsh on MG Rover, any technology will do, and that includes that powertrain.
So how long do you give motor production at Longbridge should it start?
I wish them every success, but if you go up the road to the Toyota plant at Burnaston at Derby, where they've got a 400-acre purpose-built site where they're building cars night and day, when you look at the scale and magnitude and the organisation they've got there and compare it with Longbridge, it's really like a corner shop trying to compete with a supermarket. I wish them all the luck in the world. I'm not holding my breath.
Robert Bond, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, pay-as-you-go road charging could be here within 10 years.
Part of the problem is that any government that chooses to touch motoring or motorists is in for a hiding, and I think they've done right. If I'd been the government, I would have certainly have left this until after the election, so it becomes depoliticised. The last thing we need is a political row over something that's got to be done.
Doesn't it, Robert Bond, to this Big Brother style state that people are so concerned about?
I don't really think so. We've all got to use some of the most crowded roads in Europe. Why is it that motorists are up in arms about paying nearly £4 a gallon for fuel, and yet when somebody goes to do something about it and redirect and rethink how we tax and use our road usage, there is an outcry? There is some scaremongering, but the present system is terribly unfair. If you live in the countryside now and you've got no alternative, no other means of transport, then you've got to pay those huge high taxes. Under this new proposals, people who live in the countryside will pay a lower rate for lesser used roads. If you want to get on a train at a peak time and travel into our city, you pay a premium price. If you go off peak, you don't. Same with ferry crossings, same with flying. Any means of transport is priced and costed according to use and need.
Okay,
and that's coming to the roads.
However, you'll still have the pensioner who lives in the country that needs to use their car that will turn around and say, well, that's all very well, but this is just the thin end of the wedge. We've seen this with the London congestion charge, which has just gone up from £5 to £8. Where will it end in terms of charging, Robert?
Well, that pensioner is currently paying 10 pence per mile in fuel tax, and they've got no choice on it, and they've got no other infrastructure, no no train, for instance, or no regular bus service. And the infrastructure, as your other guest was saying, desperately needs sorting out as well and improving, which I know they're doing. Under the new proposals, they'd be paying tuppence. There will be winners and losers. The current system is unfair, but the new system, I think, will be less unfair, if you like. And it'll be controversial. The alternative is gridlock. What is the point in paying £4 a gallon and not being able to drive anywhere?
OK, well, I'm sure Alistair Darling, as will everybody else, be listening with intent to your thoughts. Thank you both very much, gentlemen, for your thoughts tonight. Thank you.
Congresswoman Nita Lowey, thank you so much for spending the time to talk to me today.
My pleasure, and welcome to our wonderful community.
Well, my final question, if I may, because I know you've got a very busy schedule today. My final question is that I see Hillary Clinton making it to the White House as an outsider, as someone who doesn't really know. Would that leave the door open for you to become a senator?
Well, right now I'm a member of Congress. I had that opportunity a few years ago, and I'm really focused on my current responsibilities.
Congresswoman Nita Lowey, thank you so much for talking to us.
Welcome
to
New York.
Thank you so much.